It's August the 5th, 2021. Hi, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. We have a new site with 23 subscribers, so we're doing really good. I had 24,000 subscribers, and they just randomly took down my site. I'll address that later. We're going to cover some recent news, the Olympics, an earthquake, the Fukushima tanks. I got some great stuff for that for everybody. And we're going to start this off with just a short video with some music in it. Then we're just going to dive right in. And we got, I think for the first episode on a new site, we got a real great show for everybody. Puking in the ocean, radiation. They're growing food in Japan right alongside the bags of radiation. And they're shipping that worldwide. If you eat that, you will have leukemia in a couple of days. Or you'll have a heart attack and die. Or your children will end up with diabetes. And just an incredible host of issues. So we're going to start this off with a little video.
Captain Behan, what was your most outstanding experience on this historic flight?
I suppose it was when the clouds opened up over the target at Nagasaki. The target was there pretty as a picture. I made the run, let the bomb go. That was my greatest thrill.
There was no ink disc in a foxhole, and men who never prayed before lifted tired and bloodshot eyes to heaven and begged the Lord to end that awful war. They told him of their homes and loved ones. They told him that they'd like to be there. I believe the bomb that struck Hiroshima was the answer to that fighting boy's prayer.
Say, did you see that city where the first atomic bomb was dropped?
Yes, Fred. We flew over Hiroshima for about half an hour.
It was a shambles, huh?
A shambles. It looked like Ebbets Field after a doubleheader with the Giants.
I'm a bit slow here because this is our first episode, but trust me, we'll keep moving through. I'm Dana Durnford, the nuclearproctologist.org, and you can call in anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 709-589-4406. We are here to do battle. We are here to go to war. And so are the industry. So I posted a preamble to this video. Not sure why that's not playing. I guess it's it doesn't matter. New wind and solar is up globally 50%. So in 2020, it was equivalent of 300 nuclear power plants of renewables came online. 300 nuclear power plants worth of energy in renewables in a single year came online. And so the way this technology works is it doubles every 18 months. But now times have changed, it's doubling every 9 months or 12 months. So say 12 months. So next year, it should be 600 nuclear power plants worth of renewable energies. Currently, there's 440 nuclear power plants on the planet. Nuclear can't solve climate change. It is climate change. Earthquakes and tanks. Okay, so for the Tokyo Olympics, let's talk about that for a little bit. Here's radioactive fallout, 300,000 becquerels a square meter in Tokyo before the end of March. It never stopped. They're only talking about 131. You'll see why, because there's 1,000 isotopes also that showed up at the same time and in similar amounts. So there's 229 million becquerels in the soil after a single rainfall by Tokyo. It's actually in Tokyo, and that, which means it's never going to go away. That's never going to go away, and people in Tokyo should be abandoned. France says Japan has lost control, and the French should not just leave Tokyo, but the country. There's a reason they said that, because radiation has incredible bad attributes. Water cannons are unable to spray the reactors. And they turn away because the radiation levels are too high. The helicopters can't even get close to it and dump water on it. So it's going to be persistent for several years before they were actually able to get handy to it. Research is too frightened to get closer than 100 kilometers from the Meltdowns. So what you're talking about is an enormous amount of area with absurd amount of radiation where they continue to grow food even today. They never stop growing food there. 850 million pounds a year of just rice, and they ship that worldwide to poison you. I know that sounds incredible, but that's actually what happened and is continuing to happen. High radiation forces withdrawal of workers trying to restore power. Now, the plant was so destroyed, it's ludicrous to suggest that they were going to restore power. And one of the reasons the radiation level is so high, that's reactor 3 to your left, or what's left of it. And to the right, at the very top, is the fuel pools over there and up there, because you have no repositories. Those fuel pools are stuffed with reactor cores. Decades, and they're also were atomized in aerosol and released into the environment as radioactive fallout. The reactor in Chernobyl was 200 tons. These are 800 tons. And the reactor in Chernobyl was graphite moderated, which meant there wasn't a lot of uranium plutonium compared to these are 100% uranium plutonium. So they're a minimum, each reactor core is equal to at least 100 of the Chernobyl's emissions. But the top of the buildings had 4 decades of reactor cores stored. They were lost too. So you're talking about thousands of reactor cores released into the environment. It makes Chernobyl look like a paper towel, and Chernobyl was brutal. I want to paint you a picture, though, because this is the first episode. It's time to make a geezer suicide squad. Using the word geezer shows you this incredible contempt for elderly people and senior citizens. This unbelievable contempt to actually use that word. Concerns rising at Fukushima plant. 16,000 workers have quit. 16,000.
Another example, immediately after the first hydrogen explosion, TEPCO gave out an order a request to all of these labor dispatching companies, and they said, send us people who don't mind dying. At that time, it was really very much a panic situation, perhaps, but normally when you enter any area where there might be possible radiation exposure, you're always supposed to be issued a special kind of...
Send us people who don't mind dying. The Tokyo vice governor suggested a Fukushima draft. You know what a war draft is? They wanted to draft people across Japan. 60 and older should be prepared to die at the Fukushima plant. So what's the point of having something like that on the planet when it has those types of attributes, really? All of eastern Japan evacuated, abandoned, if Fukushima plant was abandoned. And of course, there's nothing they can do at Fukushima. So they were supposed to abandon all 14 prefectures. And Forbes, of course, which is outrageous, disgusting, pro-nuclear scum. This is outrageous. Homeless people are being sold to companies and put to work on Fukushima radiation. Not nuclear scientists or nuclear academics or nuclear students or nuclear corporations or nuclear universities have ever went there. Just victims of society. That should terrify you. You are in real danger. Homeless, UN officials astounded. Homeless are taken to work in Fukushima, and at the end of the month they're left with no pay and they end up in debt to the employers. The ultimate betrayal, every facet of nuclear is the ultimate betrayal. UN official. Mentally handicapped are working at Fukushima plant. Not Arnie Gunnarsson, not the people that work for Arnie Gunnarsson, who I'll show you later is trash, is a human traitor. Should be arrested with his wife and put in jail forever. Mentally handicapped are working at Fukushima. These are your heroes. Not Christopher Busby, not Helen Caldicott, not the nuclear engineering, not nuclear IAEA or the atomic energy agencies or the nuclear regulatories, but the unskilled and destitute are your heroes. Are the hiring targets for nuclear wasteland. TEPCO admits it will run out of workers in 5 years. In other words, they're running out of homeless and destitute and victims of society. Help Wanted ad seeks employees able to carry out a conversation. Does this sound like Yale or Stanford or Oxford or MIT? University academics working. Some people are not even being given food, have no place to go. Think about this incredible, despicable, revolting garbage industry known as nuclear. Fukushima workers, I wanted to escape from the nuclear plant, but was feared that they might hurt me. Underage people were employed, not nuclear scientists. The mentally disabled are working at Fukushima. The homeless are treated like disposable people, which is what we should be doing with nuclear academics. We should treat them literally and figuratively as disposable people. They are the root of evil. Top Tokyo doctor dealing with nuclear workers demand the government steps in at Fukushima plant for safety reasons, because people aren't even able to read. Workers are tricked to being on front lines at Fukushima. And after a few days, they throw you away with no money and lethal doses. Internal radiation exposure damages the DNA. Plutonium hard particles are seen in cells. If you're at the Tokyo Olympics in Japan, you are in danger. Everybody in the Olympics should sue Tokyo and TEPCO. Avoid the death ash is forever. This is your forever. Fukushima decontamination workers threatened. We were punished if we tried to resist. Seniors sought for frontline radiation cleanup. Suicide missions. This is the entire legacy of the history of nuclears. Everywhere you go, this is what we see. The only perpetual machine on the planet is nuclear. Misery is perpetual. This is a map from France of the radioactive fallout crossing and covering continuous plume the Pacific Ocean. You're worried about the tanks and you're not worried about what I'm showing you. You have a study over there showing each male in California was ingesting 360 atoms of just the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs a day. That doesn't terrify you? You don't want to know more? You're not worried about that? That's not an issue? Are you in Disneyland? Because obviously you must be. This is the Atlantic. That's the Pacific. This is the Northern Hemisphere covered in fission products. Not only that, the despicable, disgusting, vicious industry is burning radioactive material all over Japan, and prevailing winds carry that across and over the Pacific and all over the Northern Hemisphere. They're still doing it in the incinerators right across Japan. That's the definition of dirty bombs, and it's the definition of insane. You need to make a stand. Who else is going to do it if not you? U.S. government model of the Fukushima 137 particles covering the Northern Hemisphere. That's NOAA's model. And hidden NOAA animation shows the oceans all along the U.S. West Coast contaminated with Fukushima by March 2011 with cesium. That's the model. But you've seen airborne, it was covered in just a few days. In less than 7 days, the entire planet was a continuous plume, an invisible snowstorm, pulsing energy every second forever. It's global warming, yeah? That's the history of nuclear. Nuclear is global warming. It's climate change. Carbon, coal, oil emissions do not, and gas emissions do not pulse energy every second for millions of years. Nuclear does, though. And all nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging into the environment. So they hid NOAA's model away, and they showed you a tsunami and told you it was radiation. Then they came out and said, don't worry, it's fake. When the real one was right there. From NOAA. Not only that, this story from today, science counters Fukushima Daiichi cleanup claims by South Korea and China. First off, Fukushima operators are accused of a cover-up over the contaminated water because they won't let anybody independently test the water. If you got nothing to hide, why are you hiding? So these tanks, as you're going to see, is a fable. The tanks are actually empty. They're built to trick you into thinking the ocean is not polluted. That's the only purpose for the tanks, is to deceive you, manipulate you into believing that the ocean is not harmed. The ocean, I can assure you, is harmed. We've done research expeditions. The scientific data contradicts the critics as Japan shares facts and details on its Fukushima cleanup plan with foreign governments and international media, which, as you'll see, are the definition of goblins. Published 8 hours ago by Okida. Now, she has no experience in nuclear whatsoever. Why has she got her name on this article? It's impossible for her to write the article when she knows nothing about nuclear. Is a staff writer at the Political News Department. Political News Department. Before joining journalism, she spent her career at a mega bank as a corporate banking officer in Tokyo. And she's writing stories about nuclear, really. Wastewater from the defunct, not destroyed, not obliterated, but defunct nuclear power plants. It's a really interesting picture. These tanks are simply to manipulate the population into believing there's no harm and no foul. Radioactive particles on the seafloor are 1,000 times normal, 20 kilometers from the Fukushima plant. If it's not going in the ocean and it's all going into the tanks, how did that happen? The Japanese government aims to use facts to erase the reputational inflicted against Japan and international communities regarding the decision to release treated water from the Fukushima. As you'll see, that's an incredible fable. On Friday, of course, July the 30th, the International Atomic Energy Agency, United Nations, aka New World Order, released a report confirming the high level of accuracy and competence of Japan's laboratories. Now, that's designed to manipulate you the same as the tanks. the open and public participation of IAEA observers are claiming there's no harm to the ocean, everything's in the tank. Yet, we got studies showing the Northern Hemisphere covered in fission products, and you can't cover the Northern Hemisphere with fission products without destroying the oceans first. You have to cover the ocean, and of course, everything that lands on land, a large percentage will ultimately wash back down to the oceans. And then he talk about explaining it to the public in a YouTube video, and they take down my site with 24,000 subscribers and 1,600 videos breaking this down. Unbelievable. With no strikes and no message saying why. Hard steers poured onto Japan from the international community for the very first that the Japanese government announced its decision to release the again they're using this word treated water, as you're going to see, that's a fable. The government of Japan has responded to calm false impressions around the issue by taking the initiative to provide accurate information with scientific data to the public. And this is some of their scientific data. They had journalists not go to Japan, just fake being in Japan, fake being in a reactor that actually doesn't exist. That's their facts, where they fake it. Cecilia Vega, which is ABC Australia, CNN, BBC, CBS, the producers, the editors, the videographers, the audio, and the journalists should all be arrested and jailed for life, and hopefully will in the near future. This is 100% unequivocally a crime, what they're doing. It's a crime. They're doing that to trick you that the ocean is not contaminated. They're pretending everything is normal so you won't believe the ocean is being harmed. That doesn't warn you. China and South Korea, nevertheless, are continuing their resistance to Japan's disposal. Now, China and South Korea actually know the difference. This is called hoodwinking when you do stuff like that. Tritium release is normal in the global nuclear energy industry, so why chastise Japan? Sources say about 1,000 kinds of radioactive material released from the reactors. I'm going to speed this one up for you. This is a model of the radioactive fallout. Now, are you worried about the tanks, or are you going to be worried about what you're looking at? You're not worried about this? This polluted the ocean in less than 7 days. See, they got you thinking about tanks, which, by the way, I'm going to break down for you, and stuff you've never seen before. Doesn't exist on the internet anymore because they took down my site. And look at it. So you think China and South Korea doesn't understand this? Right? It's called hoodwinking, where they got China and South Korea fighting back against Japan, dumping tanks that are actually empty a long time ago, as you'll see coming up shortly. Prime Minister Suga followed this with a further elaborations of the testing process and release plan. If you go back to 2013, and I did, Japanese government criticized the TEPCO's poor management of leaks. Suga said on Monday it's unacceptable to have contaminated water leaked from the plant's storage tanks and flow into the ocean. China and South Korea not interested, in fact, says bizarre Japan media. They said the water to be discharged is not the contaminated water, but the treated water from which radioactive materials and other materials have been removed by a cleanup system. Now, we'll challenge that coming up here in a moment. Almost the entire ground level of the Northern Hemisphere covered in radioactive fission products. 450,000 times above detection levels pre-Fukushima. And persisted for weeks. You should be terrified of what I'm showing you. You should be mortified that we're not talking about that. We're talking about hoodwinking people by talking about perpetual lies like treated water. you're covered in xenon fission products. You got the study actually showing it 450,000 times. These are absurd numbers that have wiped out the majority of the species already. U.S. media CNN reported before the discharge, the water in the tank will also be sufficiently diluted. So the concentrations of the tritium, and I'll show you what's really going on here. Here's CNN pretending they're in the building 100 feet above what you can try to describe as a deck to your left.
We are here inside reactor.
Hang on, I'll turn that up and start it again.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
So that's CNN pretending they're at the top of a building to the left that don't even exist. And we're supposed to take their word for it. She should be in jail forever. Why is she not in jail? She should get the death penalty for what she's doing. So here's the hoodwink. The government of South Korea has resisted Japan's plan for ocean discharge of the treated water, saying without scientific reason, the decision will invite the risk for safety of neighboring countries and the maritime environment. In other words, don't worry about what's happened. Worry about something that might happen that doesn't even exist because they already dumped it. The ocean has already been destroyed. This is the hoodwinking. See? I'll show you. Hang around. To cooperation with degenerate monsters called the IAEA, the Fukushima Daiichi Treated Water Release Plan. Again, treated. Okay, let's go back to 2014 and look at the ELP systems and the REVA system. So the REVA system was the first system they were using to filter water. It can't actually be done, and it's lethal doses. The filters, if you do filter this type of water, the filter is lethal doses immediately, and any water goes through it is even more contaminated than what you're putting in it in the first place. It's like taking an oil filter, putting on an old beater, and then trying to run clean water out the other side. It's simply absurd to suggest it could be done. So they say it uses chemicals to remove radioactive material. The decontamination system was forced to shut down for a variety of problems. For the last 3 years, the system had been unused and kept out of operation. So the first 3 years, they're telling you there was no filtration system, period. One of the problems is dismantling it, as it becomes contaminated itself after processing the radioactive material. We're talking 2 sieverts a liter. The filters become so lethal you can't get in the building or near the building. The radiation levels measured in the system posed a risk to the homeless during operations and maintenance of the system. They couldn't run it. The first 3 years, there was no system. The design was so complicated, it took 50 welders more than a month to put the system together. Because it was a fable, see? Underneath the plant, the enormous amount of groundwater continues to flow directly into the ocean. Directly into the ocean. Think about what you just heard. Think about what they just told you. TEPCO attempted to divert some of the flow of groundwater with underground bypass, but failed to achieve any results. So all the way up until August 2014, all the water was going in the ocean, all of it. It's lethal doses. If you try pumping it, the hoses are lethal doses. You can't step over them or get near them. See, if you try to filter, and you'll see coming up this type of water at 2 sieverts per liter, you're talking about millions of sieverts in the filter in just one day. That translates into lethal doses a football field away. It can't be done. It was there to trick you. And that's what I just showed you. It was there to trick you. Typical releases video of groundwater entering the crippled Fukushima Daiichi plant. 2.2 sieverts per hour. The tanks used to store tons of radioactive water in the site at Fukushima have been rising to over 2.2 sieverts per hour. That's around the tanks, the stuff that's spilled out, per liter. ELP system brought back online June the 23rd. It was the same story, see? It's a fable. Once you turn it on, you can't get near it. Has not only damaged equipment, causing corrosion and leaks, but prevents the highly radioactive water. Also prevents workers from spending time working near the system. It's lethal doses. That's their way of basically telling you it doesn't work. So you had the Riva system, which is France, didn't work. And you had ELP system, doesn't work. And they're still using the ELP system. It doesn't work, see? It's impossible to remove the hundreds of radioactive material. 1,200 radionuclides. 62 can be reduced, but then the filters are so lethal, the water that you're putting through, you can put clean water through the filters after one day, and the water coming out the other side is lethal doses by the gallon. I am not kidding you. You put clean water through the filter forever, and it's going to come out the other end now, lethal doses. Because that's how radiation works. Tanks at the crippled Japan nuclear plant leaks highly radioactive water, August the 20th, 2013. As I showed you, there was nothing in the tanks. If you fill the tanks up at 2.2 sieverts per liter, you can't build another tank around there. So therefore, the tanks have to be empty. You can't fill the tanks up with water you're pouring over a reactor core that's melted down. You simply can't, it can't be done because of the Bromson lung effect, which causes an X-ray effect. So radiation pulses almost at the speed of light. The there's so much there, they hit each other at the speed of light. The pulses do. And because like radiation pulses like a bomb, think of a bomb detonation. It doesn't just detonate a little point that way. It detonates in a 360 degree environment, yeah? Well, radiation does the same thing. So when they hit each other at the speed of light, they change direction almost at the speed of light. It's known as a braking effect. It causes an X-ray effect over the whole area. And these doses are absurd doses for people at the site. This is why 16,000 people ran away, I showed you earlier. 100 steel tanks built across the plant complex, but as I just showed you, the filtration system didn't work and wasn't turned on only for a couple of days. They couldn't get near it after that and couldn't dismantle it. I just showed it all to you. Then they showed you this in 2013. They showed you that. That's supposed to be them above the pool in that building over there. That's a lethal dose to go near it, let alone to be in an invisible fuel pool at the top of a building that don't even exist. This is why they took down my site. Like, there's a real problem, real disconnect on this planet here. I got 6 people on my live show. 6 people. 6 people. I got 5 thumbs up. On the most important subject in human history. And I'm the only person on the planet that is bringing you this evidence. This is not my opinion. I'm showing you the documentation. And my support is 6 people. A total of 17 playbacks. God bless your hearts. Doomsday-like radiation release. Doomsday-like. Look up that word later. If fire and pool at Unit 4, it would be a global catastrophe. That's Unit 4. There's where the fuel pools would be. Obviously, they're gone. That's doomsday-like radiation. And so 450,000 times of xenon-133 above detection levels in the northern hemisphere and persisted for weeks is the doomsday radiation. 1 million becquerels per square meter underground is doomsday radiation in the northern hemisphere, North America and America. 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131 per liter of rainwater is doomsday-like radiation because it wipes out the insects, the bacteria in your forest. This is why you're seeing the brutal forest fires, because the trees are not breaking down anymore and there's no insects in the forest. And I was on a research expedition doing species counts, and they took down my site. I never offered no explanation. This is the nuclear lobby done that. Here's another study, 220 million atoms per liter. Now, who are you going to believe? The perpetual lawyers, TEPCO, and your media? Or are you going to believe the documentation that I keep showing you? Because this actually matters. This is actually the most important story in human history and the species history. And we need to act. We need to act immediately. It's never too late. At some point we're going to act. What are we waiting for? This is why they silenced me. They took away my site with 24,000 subscribers and 1,600 videos. Obviously something happened. Right? Somebody found my site and went, holy shit. They were monitoring it, because this is what they're doing right now on top of that. And they pulled my site. It's really, you can imagine, 1,600 presentations, 24,000 subscribers, and now I have 23 subscribers, a new site, because we have no choice but to have this conversation. We have no choice but to keep pushing back. I have no choice. I can't sit out for a day. I can't take any time off. This is too important. 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur per square meter, cubic meter in the California air. Another study. But you're worried about this fabled tank? They got you tricked and deceived and manipulated. Don't be tricked. 2013, pretending, all the journalists, look at all these journalists, this is probably America somewhere, doing a photo shoot pretending they're at Japan inside of a reactor building that doesn't even exist. A fuel pool that doesn't even exist. In this November 2013 file photo, members of the media and Tokyo Electric Company employees walk down the steps of Reactor 4. Here's Reactor 4 to your left. And those two people should be arrested and charged with crimes against humanity immediately. Think about this statement here. Nothing like this has ever been attempted, Yale professor. All of humanity will threaten for thousands of years. Thousands of years if the fuel rods in uniform pool touch and have a reaction. Arnie Gunnarsson was everywhere in the media telling you the same story. He knew it didn't look like the picture to the left. He knew it looked like the picture to the right. Not only that, here's Unit 3. It was also clearly the fuel pools were gone and the reactor core were gone. So this Yale professor was hoodwinking you the same as they're doing right now. Here's the media pretending they're on top of the building to the right. Now here's how they done that fable. They built the structure off-site, moved it there, but when you actually scrutinize what they got done, this is 177 feet tall. The reactor buildings were originally 190 feet tall. And you see the holes in the bottom and to your very left. Here's what the reactor looked like. The fuel pools were at the very top. Right, the fuel pools were way up there. See, they're gone. So they built this to trick you into thinking that they're in the fuel pool. Because you're actually in real danger. We are in real danger. We need to act appropriately. We need to have a conversation, not banish people, the very few handful of people that are trying to have a real conversation like me and you. when you look at that, when you scrutinize reactor 3, which was a mixed oxide fuel building, which means it's 1 billion times worse than a normal, brutal, devastating planet killer nuclear meltdown. My God, how many people lied to get to this stage? So behind me, you can see right through the building. Same over there. The building is completely destroyed. So they built this structure to trick you, manipulate you. When you zoom in, and this is unusual pictures you won't see anywhere else. When you zoom in, what you discover is the building is completely destroyed. There is no building, see? They built that. This is number 3. They built this whole structure, brought it in with cranes, so the media can bombard you with lies like they're doing with the tanks. That's what reactor 3 looked like. There was no fuel pools. The same thing for reactor 4. There is no fuel pools. They built that simply as a ploy to deceive and manipulate you and trick you and make you complacent. And by proxy, they endanger all the species and all the humans and the future of humanity and the planet's species on this planet. Now, I haven't stopped since I got home yesterday. This is reactor 3. Does that look like a 190-foot building to you? So if that's not a 190-foot building, why did he put a 177-foot structure that doesn't physically touch it? Because obviously that will crumble if you put any weight on it. Or if you have an earthquake, you can have a chain reaction ignite again, see? And there's no way to stop it from getting out because look at it. It's not even sealed. It was the same thing for reactor 4. Do you think that's a 190 feet high building? Do you think they're really coming out of that building? This is Photoshop. Do you realize the top of the building over there is where the fuel pools actually are? They don't even exist. So both reactor 4 and reactor 3, they built those structures, the nuclear industry and the nuclear lobbyists, the nuclear universities, and your universities worldwide, your media worldwide participated, because if you scrutinize it, you would know what I'm showing you is true. Any media, any journalist, if they tried, could sort that out probably 10 times better than I can. They didn't, and unfortunately, so look, this is when they built the structure. They never built it. They done it with cranes. They put a support beams around the site, around this destroyed building. Then they faked these pictures. I inserted myself in there. Can you tell me which one I am? How about now? So it's really easy to fake what I'm showing you, isn't it? So this building here, as you can see, this picture only showed up once. But you were able to zoom right in. Look at the clarity of that picture. And that's reactor 3. So when you zoom right into reactor 3 with that one single picture, what did I end up with? But the cover story is blown. That one picture had only shown up one single time. And I downloaded it and couldn't believe how good quality it was. And to my horror, my utter horror, I realized, oh my God, they're faking it. Just like Arnie Gunnarsson and Megat Gunnarsson are pretending that the building to their left is the real building, when in reality the building to the right is the real building. I put the two pictures there to show you the deception. Top scientist is David Suzuki. Fukushima is the most terrifying situation I can imagine. I've seen a paper which said it's bye-bye Japan to evacuate the North American West Coast if the Unit 4 goes after a earthquake. I'll play the clip for you, and I might have to adjust the volume, and I will on my end.
3 out of the 4 plants were destroyed in the earthquake and in the tsunami. The 4th one has been so badly damaged that the fear is If there's another earthquake of a 7 or above, that building will go, and then all hell breaks loose. I have seen a paper which says that if, in fact, the 4th plant goes under an earthquake and those rods are exposed, it's bye-bye Japan, and everybody on the west coast of North America should evacuate. Now, if that isn't terrifying, I don't know what. Fukushima is the most terrifying situation I can imagine.
So if reactor 4 collapses, then it's bye-bye Japan, and you should evacuate the west coast of the northern hemisphere. Well, as you can see to the right, it's gone. Here's the media to the right, in their words, telling you they're on top of the building to the left, 100 feet above that the yellow stopper, which is the top of the reactor, which is supposed to be about 80 feet above where it is right now.
Where I was standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
Try wrapping your mind around that. They should be either in jail for life, or they should get the electric chair, actually, for what they're doing. Because they disarmed the entire planet. They hoodwinked the entire planet. All the media participated in that same lie, by the way. How come? Because it's harmless? Because it's not going to hurt you or your children or your friends or your family or the species or the insects or the birds or the animals? Did you really think they're pretending that is existing because they got nothing better to do on that day? Do you really think that I'm wrong? It's not me. It's all these people that I show you already. You think they're all wrong. In the context, the ones that were warning you, and that the lawyers, obviously, they're not on top of the building to the left. David Suzuki making a statement that if it collapses, the building there, and it did collapse, it was bye-bye Japan, not because it's going to blow up, but because of radioactive fallout. So here's that picture again. When you zoom in on reactor 4, what do you see? They didn't clean up the debris behind it because you can't be inside of a building that don't exist. That's lethal doses is why they didn't even bother cleaning that up. And they hoodwinked you with both reactor 3 to the left and reactor 4. Let's talk about the tanks. August 30th, 2013. 1,000 steel tanks. Now, I showed you earlier the ELP system and the Riva system for water filtration didn't work all the way up to August 2014. If you filled up a single tank, you couldn't build another tank because we're talking at least 2.2 sieverts per liter. You can't get close enough to build a tank there, another tank, if you fill up a single tank. That's science. So they're faking it, as we showed you earlier. So let's move up to 2014. In 2014, they had 1,200 tanks. Because that was meant to trick you and make you complacent. Meant to deceive you. In 2014, in November, they had 1,000 tanks. 6,000 workers were working, passing through the gate each day. The majority of them were for the water. What are 6,000 people going to do with lethal doses per liter of water? Nothing. There's not 6,000 people there. There's nothing there for 6,000 people to do. This was meant to trick you into thinking that they are hard at work. So 1,000 tanks back then. And as well as the extra fuel rods would sit in cooling pools at the top of the reactor buildings. I showed you that the top of the reactor buildings don't exist. And I showed you the media pretending they're at the top of the reactor buildings. Pretending. It's absurd. Why would they do that? Risky stalemate as science battles human fears. And what's the date on that? 2017 from Australia. The Australian media are disgusting. They had 900 tanks. So 900 tanks. Second sentence from the bottom. Densely packed tanks. If you fill these tanks up at 2.2 sieverts per liter, you can't build another tank there. Anywhere. It's lethal doses. You can't get back on the site. You're talking millions of sievers. The tanks are not thick enough. It's got to be a foot of steel thick to shield you from that kind of radiation. Well, actually, just from radioactive fallout, it needs to be a foot thick. Wrap your mind around what I'm saying because it's fact. So the tanks need to be about 6 foot thick of steel to shield the workers. It's not. It's just bolted together and the bolts will corrode right away. He stood on steel plates, by the way, but he's not even there. Look how he's walking. Look how his hands are. Look how he's walking around on a construction site with plastic over your boots. You think that's going to last more than a few moments? You really think you can walk around a construction site with plastic over your boots and that's actually going to work? That's actually going to stay on your feet for more than a few minutes? You think plastic is not going to get holes? You think plastic is now the new Kevlar? You think that he's holding his hands, his perfect posture? Wrap your mind around it. 2019. In 2019, they had, that sentence right there, go all the way over, 1,000 tanks. 2013, 1,000 tanks. 2014, 1,200 tanks. 2017, 900 tanks. 2019, 1,000 tanks. 2021, 1,000 tanks. So they had 1,000 tanks in 2013, 1,000 tanks in 2021. You really think they're filling up tanks for the last 10 years? And not only that, as I showed you earlier, they couldn't filter the water, period, all the way up minimum until August 2014. Do you really think anything changed the next day, the next week, the next month, or the next year? I can assure you it didn't. And I just proved to you it didn't. You think China and South Korea actually don't know the difference? Am I a bad person for doing what I'm doing? Did I deserve to lose my site yesterday with 24,000 subscribers and 1,600 hard-earned videos, presentations, absurd amount of work? It was a panic. They panicked because a single person is having a conversation and is honest. They panicked because there's an honest person on the planet. That freaked them out. They freaked out yesterday and panicked. They said, well, Durnford's scum. Who cares about him? And they're right. There's 8 of you that care. God bless each and every one of you. Water storage nightmare. Bolts in Fukushima tanks will corrode in just a few years. Well, they're going to corrode even if you don't fill the tanks up. But if you fill the tanks up and bolted tanks at 2.2 sieverts a liter, it'll be leaking out. Small puddle is a lethal dose. Remember James Colbert had done a video saying you have to get down and sniff the water for 6 hours to get the same dose as flying on an airplane. You just play the clip all the time, right? Him and that other little demon. So the Bromson lung effect is radiation fallout, and I do this just to give you it's an invisible snowstorm. If you could see it, this is what it would look like right now. See, because it's over 2 sieverts per liter of beta emitter, which is not true, right? It's gamma and alpha and neutrons. So mostly neutrons, which is curium and plutonium, uranium, because the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods is the curium isotopes. We know that from the dog studies, right? From Raymond Gilmedy, Dr. Raymond Gilmedy. Sources say about 1,000 kinds of radioactive material released from the reactors. Not just iodine, not just cesium. That's the bird brain lie. Study finds giant strontium-90 released into a body of water begins about 1,000 days after the reactor meltdowns. We're at 3,800 days. That continues now for thousands of days. And the numbers are about, for every cesium-137, it's about 100 strontium-90 bone seekers. Strontium-90 ends up in your bones and mutates your stem cells, and much worse than that. Inhaling just a single hot particle can cause a cancer, and everything from a nuclear meltdown is a hot particle. A single particle can cause a tumor in your lung, says another scientist. See, deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. Not because it's going to blow up the world, but because of the radioactive fallout. And I showed you the studies and the models. I'll show you some more coming up here in a moment. Xenon, known to bombard the lungs, and with powerful X-rays, then it turns into cesium. There's the 133 xenon models covered in the northern hemisphere. This is why all the species disappeared. That's why I'm out doing species counts. Nuclear engineer, I agree, Fukushima can be an extinction event. It's a myth that the disaster is contained. So this radioactive fallout model, like I'm currently at the end of Canada up there. I'll show you. I'm currently right here. Now, I've done 6 years of research to Alaska, 4 to 5 months a year up here. This is British Columbia all the way to Alaska. There's 27,000 islands there. Species completely wiped out. You can check it out at my site, thenuclearproctologist.org, on the very front page when you get there. And we're seeing the same thing now here on the east coast of Canada, because you can see the radioactive fallout completely wiped out the species. We're documenting it again this year. Here's the models made of the Neptunium-239 dispersion, which changes into plutonium-239 from TEPCO's numbers covering the northern hemisphere. Then you have plutonium dispersal using TEPCO's numbers covering the northern hemisphere. Extraordinarily important studies, the dispersal models. Now this story, Sugar abandons appeal of black rain. So this is about survivors of Nagasaki, Hiroshima. And so what's going on is, for 75 years, since 1945, they have been asking for medical support to have their medical illnesses covered by the government because they were at Nagasaki and their version is they were breathing in radiation. So the very last sentence, ministry officials have long argued that the black rain case, I'll explain it to you, that ingestion of food and water would only add to a small amount of radiation that would be insufficient to cause any health problems to the Nagasaki, Hiroshima. So for 75 years, the government of Japan has refused to acknowledge that people at Nagasaki and Hiroshima had breathed in or consumed or drank or eaten and got internal exposures. So they only studied them for external exposure. Wrap your mind around this. For 75 years, they refused. Now, there's only a few of them left because it happened 75 years ago. There's not many of them left. The majority of them are long gone, of course. Bear with me. Here we go. I'm not gonna pile a whole bunch on you. I'm just gonna give you a tiny fraction of the documentation of the actual academic studies. And what I've done was I paired it together with pictures. I'm gonna put it on the big screen, and I'm just gonna play through it, run through it. I'm not gonna try to articulate it, but you might want to stop the video later and read through some of this. Radiation injuries. These are academic studies to your left and pictures to your right. And ask yourself, do you really think that the people there, see that study, UV radiation, they're trying to blame ultraviolet radiation for why the A-bomb survivors had cardiacs. They're doing everything they can to not blame nuclear. 65 years, I think that study was 2012. Long-term follow-up of bomb survivors. They studied them like lab rats. Do you really believe that anybody to the right is not breathing in radioactive fallout? Does anybody on this planet believe that the people to the right weren't breathing in radiation? Is there actually, that's a fake picture, unfortunately, my radon, the ultimate insult, they used radon in a study to downplay radiation. Look at it. It's absurd. Do you think the people to the right never got breathed in radiation? That's a picture of them dropping the bomb in Nagasaki. I don't understand how you can deny the people that survived to the right health care by claiming that there was no damage because of radioactive fallout. Why did you build a city back on a nuclear bomb crater? What kind of twisted, sick and demented and sadistic monster would dream that one up? Oh, let's build a community back in a nuclear bomb crater and claim there is no radioactive fallout. These are absurd suggestions. Atomic bomb survivors. So the big fight with Suga for 75 years with the Japanese government is they refuse to believe that the people at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, despite the incredible overwhelming amount of evidence that we have, I'm showing to you, breathe in radiation. That's the legacy of nuclear. Now, if they admit that the people had breathed in radiation, they have to admit that the city is radioactive now. So they refuse to do it because the city actually is radioactive now. It's unbelievable that for 75 years, the survivors were denied. For 75 years, they denied them medical attention because they said there was no internal radiation doses for 75 years. That's one of the cruelest longevity. That's 75 years of cruelty by their own government. And the nuclear industry worldwide refused now to speak out for them for 75 years. Diabetes from radiation, look at that. By the way, this is only a tiny, tiny fraction of the academic studies that I actually have on this subject from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like, it's absurd that we're having this conversation. So for 75 years, all they'd done was studied external doses. They never studied internal doses for 75 years on the Hiroshima and Nagasaki victims. You know, if you want to go listen to music, go listen to music. If you're not going to stick on the topic, then you're wasting my valuable time here. I'm not here to have my time wasted. So nobody in these cities were breathing in radiation. That's the official story. Nobody was breathing in radiation. Does anybody believe that's true? It's not related. Stay on topic. You think it's all related, do you? Telling people to go listen to music. When I work like a dog, I got 6 people on my live show. And you're telling them to go somewhere else and listen to music. Don't look at what I'm showing them. Because that's ultimately what you just told everybody to go do, see? I work like a dog. All day, every day. And I do my show and you come here and do that to me. I don't understand it, that disconnect. So they abandoned the appeal of black rain. It wasn't black rain, it's radioactive fallout. It's an insult to call it black rain. What the hell are you talking about, black rain? Look at the studies. So for 65 years, the very last paragraph of the story, that's when they told you what it was about. The very last paragraph. That's the norm in the nuclear industry. The death cult of the nuclear industry wouldn't even give the survivors the common courtesy. And this is where they claim the black rain fell. Did you see the pictures that I just showed you? The cities, you really think those cities are not radioactive? You think it's only where the rainfall fell later? You really think that that's not radioactive? That's not radioactive. You really think that's not radioactive? Because it is. You think it all happened later? You don't think that plume that drifted right around the planet, they found the radiation in all the glaciers worldwide. Like, look at the lunatics. Armenia, stupid enough to pair up with Japan. The Japanese Nuclear Regulatory Agency, who denied the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki for 75 years medical relief, are someone you should trust. They have 75 years of stabbing hundreds of thousands of people who are suffering. And, oh no, it's in your mind. You haven't got internal radiation. Chinese nuclear power plant would have been closed in France as co-owner. The Chinese nuclear power station would have already been closed in France. Really? Does anybody really believe that one? You know how evil France actually is? They radiated every person in French Polynesian islands with almost 200 nuclear bombs, for God's sakes. And even today refuses to acknowledge that they got irradiated. The nuclear industry is humanity and 8 million species' biggest nightmare, worst enemy. The most demonic creature on the planet is everybody in the nuclear industry. A month after having warned against an imminent radiological threat, well, China, they're trying to now get everybody to turn on China, right? The media done the same thing with Trump. It was a prime example. All the media, all day, screaming about Trump till everybody on the planet was screaming about Trump. They were regurgitating whatever the media told them to regurgitate. That's what they're now doing to China, the exact same thing. China is the new Trump. The reactor was leaking fission gas, adding that EDF. Now, that's true 100%, but France has a legacy of reactors leaking much more radiation and not telling anybody, or refusing to acknowledge it, and then the truth came out decades later. Thursday, EDF announced in a press release the analysis of the loss of the sealing of the fuel rods on the site. What happened? They admit that a bunch of fuel rods melted down. And so they were originally talking about the zirconium cladding had burnt off. Like, the only way this can happen if you had a catastrophic event. China had a catastrophic event, but not like Fukushima. But still brutal. There's still an incredible, absurd amount of radiation, what they call burped from the reactor. And this is normal for all reactors. They have fuel that fails. The radiation ends up, because it's a gas, right? So it ends up piling up in places and they vent it. Every nuclear plant has this legacy, and all of that is global warming. It's constantly going on. All the reactor fuel pools are venting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The older the reactor fuel pool, the more fuel is in it, the more splitting atoms. And the numbers are trillions of atoms of fission products coming out of fuel pools per liter of water. About 120,000 liters boil off each day. It's global warming in overdrive. Nuclear is an imminent threat to all species. It's wiped out the majority of them already, as the research has shown. Is there a risk to the Chinese public? The United States would be required to disclose it under current nuclear accident treaties. The United States would be required to disclose it. The United States hid Santa Susana since 1959. That's just one of the many sodium reactors that had melted down in America. It was 460 times more radiation released at 3 Mile Island, but they're all telling you the worst reactor accident in the United States is 3 Mile Island. When it's obviously, clearly, Santa Susana, a sodium reactor that melted down in 1959. Framatome, which is France, a nuclear reactor company owned by EDF, which is France government, has contacted the United States for a waiver would allow them to share American technical assistance to resolve the issue. And the exemption can only be granted for 2 reasons, one of which is an imminent radiological threat. The CAEA added, which is China's Atomic Energy Agency, added that the reactor suffered a minor fuel rod cladding failure, which caused an increase in radioactivity. So, first off, if the cladding fails, the fuel rod will start evaporating. It's plutonium and uranium. It's not cladding, it's fission products. Yeah, China has a major event going on there. Although such failures lead to an increase in radioactivity of the reactor coolant, The reactor can continue to operate safely as long as the levels remain within whatever. They just keep increasing the numbers of what's considered acceptable. There is no industry. There's a monster on everybody's back. It's called nuclear. The amount of radioactive nuclear fuel stored is 3 times that stored at the Fukushima plant in Japan, which is impossible. Again, trying to downplay Fukushima. Fukushima's reactors, before they melted down, were the biggest in the world. And they were 40 years old, which meant they had some of the most fuel, period, on the planet. China's reactors, on the other hand, don't have those attributes. Radioactive chemical found in Fukushima honey. Fukushima honey. So South Korea chef wouldn't use the honey because it was radioactive, and 130 to 160 becquerels of just one isotope. It would have been loaded with all the other ones. The accident caused 3 nuclear meltdowns, releases into the air, and water contamination, blah, 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 because they downplay it all. Nami is just 12 kilometers north of the disaster site. They're getting honey from Nami was abandoned for 6 years because of radiation. And they think the honey there is somehow going to be safe, and they're only checking for cesium. The newspaper added that 1,400 products containing the honey sold at train stations and shops in the prefecture will be recalled. Well, how many made it to market? 1,400 products. See, their Geiger counter, they're only looking for cesium. Again, this is the game they play. Your Geiger counter can only find gamma. It can't find alpha or beta, or more importantly, neutron, which is uranium, plutonium, curium. I got to hook my Geiger counter back up. Discovery came after Japan's prime minister. Now they're going to call him, because they normally just call him sugar, has repeatedly assured people food products from Fukushima are safe to eat in order to mitigate the international concern. When it's obviously not. Oh, by the way, the United States has revealed it cooks over 7,000 special meals for its athletes with its own food ingredients. They brought 32 tons of food. 32 pickup truck, 1-ton pickup truck loads of food for 7,000 meals. Americans are not even eating Japanese food. They're eating their own food they brought with them. Wrap your mind around it. $1,400 products recalled. How many other incidences? I mean, how much of that is shipped to Canada, the United States, and other countries? Can nuclear power save the planet? This is British. Now look, what do you see about that picture? Well, you got to see the whole picture. It's surrounded by farms. It's surrounded by farms. If you eat the food from there, you have to get sick at some point. So what we done was we try to figure out how many nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. Why would they do something like that? But in the headline of the story, it says, even without accidents like Chernobyl and Fukushima, nuclear power creates radioactive waste at every stage of production, including uranium mining, but none of that was actually in the story. But it was there in the little blurb, right? It was redacted from the study. But when you think about farms, let me show you something. 90+% of nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. And they know for a fact that foliage and soil uptake radiation at an incredible rate. So all nuclear power plants or not all, but the majority of them are surrounded by farms. The rest of them are in communities. So the idea is to poison you by farms if they can't get you some other way. Surrounded by farms. And you eat the food on the other side of the planet and get sick and die. And they know for sure that plants, you'll see these studies here and there, I'll put in there for you. They know that the radiation gets sucked up by the farms. Why are all your nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? Because this industry is a murderous, genocidal, maniac industry. These are scum, degenerate monsters, and we don't even need nuclear. I showed you at the beginning, 300 nuclear power plants where the renewables came online last year. Why? My God, that should horrify everybody on this planet. Because they know for a fact, like potatoes suck up radiation. Why are you building nuclear power plants in farm country? Throughout history too, look at it. Surrounded by farms. And they know unequivocally that's the worst thing you could do. Look at it. They're murdering us. They're murdering everybody on the planet by poisoning them also through the food and the endless releases. This is not an accident. In fact, in Japan, they grow 850 million pounds of rice each year in the exclusion zone. And if they can't sell it all, they turn it into sake. And the Fukushima government has opened a sake shop in New York. The Fukushima government is poisoning people in New York with sake. And who knows where else. I mean, this is absurd that the government of a nuclear wasteland has a sake shop in New York. It's no different than farms surrounding your nuclear power plants. The entire industry is a lunatic. Diablo Canyon plant, I don't know, off the top of my head, probably not. I'm in the middle of a show here right now. Vertical soil transfer by a tree root system. So they know that nuclear power plants are sucking up or spitting out radiation 24/7, and that the farms are going to poison you later. It's by design. Sorry, Steve, I'm lost in translation. 134 cesium-85 strontium in fruit plants. It's not like they don't know is what I'm showing you, see? You think that this is an accident, that all 90% of nuclear power plants are in nuclear wastelands? They hate your guts. They hate all the species on the planet. They despise us. They have absurd contempt. They have murderous intention. They have murderous intentions by doing this because they got all the studies that says that is the stupidest thing you can do is have a nuclear power plant in farm country. It's not just one, it's the majority of them worldwide, and nuclear dumps and nuclear laboratories are at the biggest aquifers around the planet. All countries, even the future nuclear power plants, surrounded by farms. This is the most horrifying pictures in human history because they got the studies and they know how evil it actually is. They actually know it's evil to do that. So I was out just a couple of days ago, this is what I was doing. I was out on an expedition. And they jacked my site, 24,000 subscribers. And so I was studying the radioactive fallout here, not just Seattle. Hot particles in Seattle at 50% of the levels seen in Tokyo. And I had to come home because he took down my site. I'm burnt out. I haven't stopped. I only got home just a short while. 36 hours maybe? No, not even that. Fukushima disaster go on almost to infinity. It will never be resolved. Prime Minister, I had to start up a new YouTube channel because they destroyed my 24,000 subscribers and 1,600 videos, presentations. Over a decade of work gone with no explanation. And now I got 9 people on my show. And which is really good. I'm actually lucky. And I got 6 thumbs up. It's absurd. So they won, right? How dare somebody have a conversation? And they're sat there now laughing their heads off about this. High radiation levels around the plant prevented helicopters. All 600 helicopter pilots at Chernobyl died. Of course, you won't see that on Wikipedia. Top government nuke official warned Tokyo may have to evacuate. Tokyo, where they're having the Olympics, not may have to evacuate, was supposed to evacuate. Like as I showed you that earlier, Tokyo was brutalized. I'll show you some more. Tokyo, 230,000 becquerels per square meter cesium on athletes' field. 6 times as high as limits set for radiation control zones in Chernobyl. In Tokyo is way 6 times more radioactive than Chernobyl. And you're what? Having the Olympics? 50,000 becquerels a kilogram of radioactive cesium found in soil near Tokyo. Terrifying. The sample was from the side of the streets where children walk every day and the Olympic athletes are now playing. A sign that a grave contamination is in progress in Tokyo. 2,300 becquerels a kilogram detected in soil near a plant in Koto Ward. The winds have turned hot particles to head south from Fukushima. Advices to leave Tokyo if number 4 reactor collapses. Well, reactor 4 collapsed. And guess who knew? Everybody in the industry, including Ernie Gunnarsson and Megat Gunnarsson. They spent 10 years tricking you, 10 years deceiving you, 10 years manipulating you, 10 years lying to you, 10 years trying to murder you. They're trying to murder you. They're trying to murder you. They're doing everything they can to murder you with radiation to stop you from knowing the difference. That's murder. If I give you a poison pill and you die, and I know it's poison, is that not murder? Do you think they're not murdering you? You think that they shouldn't be in jail for life minimum? They should be in jail and until on death row and then publicly executed. These are criminals. That's all they are. They're not people. They don't have any attributes of a human whatsoever. They spent day after day, video after video, lying to you, telling you that it was like a crushed pack of cigarettes. You got to get the fuel rods out of a building that don't even exist. Telling you that that's what it looks like, not this. But I'm a bad person for saying that these are criminals. That's how bizarre this world actually is. They're not bad for lying to you and trying to murder you. I'm bad for pointing it out. I'm the bad person. In fact, before the show started, I'll show you. Hopefully. I tried to show you earlier, but we had some technical difficulties. I had 5 thumbs down before the show started, no thumbs up. Try wrapping your mind around that. 5 thumbs down But by the time the show started, Google's spam filter had caught that and it was 0 and 0. But that's the video we're watching right now. I had 5 thumbs down, 2 hours. 2 hours before the show started. That's how the industry works. I only got 9 people on my show right now as it is. I only got 6 thumbs up right now as it is. I'm afraid to look to see how many thumbs down I got. Because you know they came back. You know they came back. And you know they're there to stab me in the face if they get the opportunity, right? You know for a fact. Let's see. I'll bring it up for you in a second here. See how bad they already dinged me. Says I got 17 thumbs up. And no, that's the other video. Hang on. I got 9 thumbs down on my video from yesterday. Unbelievable. I got 6 thumbs up and 2 thumbs down right now. That's pretty good. Like, wrap your mind around that. Really, try wrapping your mind around the fact that I got 6 thumbs up and 2 thumbs down. It just seems impossible to me. But, you know, it is what it is. It's not like I got the option of giving up. It's not like the option I got of slowing down. But if I'm like them, I get 1,000 thumbs up. Everybody promotes them. No one calls them out. But I'm the bad person. I got 2 thumbs down already. IAEA today admitted there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation, and that the allowable radiation standards are based on benefits, which is natural stuff, not safety, which is anthropogenic man-made stuff. So the IAEA is using a fake scale to judge safety. They're using like potassium instead of cesium and uranium plutonium. They should be in jail with Arnie Gunnarsson and Megan Gunnarsson. Maggie Gunnarsson, by the way, was a spokesperson for the nuclear industry for 20 years. You really think she switched sides? Because we can't find no evidence that she did. We got all the evidence that shows that she's a murderous monster, an actual demon that should be in jail right now for the rest of her natural life on death row waiting to be executed for what they've done. That's minimum. There is no debate. They are criminals. Japan bans radioactive green tea from areas 40 miles southwest of Tokyo, which is on the other side of Tokyo towards Osaka. This is absurd. But you can't pollute 40 miles past Tokyo and not contaminate Tokyo too. The nuclear industries is the definition of moron. High levels of murderous morons. High levels of radioactive material found in Tokyo. 170,000 becquerels a kilogram in the sewage and the excrements. Per kilogram. They're excreting 178,000 becquerels a kilogram. Do you think the athletes right now are going to be any different? They're insane. Experts detect 5 times higher radiation levels in Tokyo than the government announced. 5.7 microsieverts is not how you measure radiation in Tokyo. You measure it by becquerels, atomic decays per second, by atoms. This is how they cover it up, but that's still absurd numbers. This is absurd. And the world is in real danger. We are in incredible danger. Fukushima, unprecedented in scope. The situation appears utterly beyond human control. Raging fire in a spent fuel pond, yet claimed only a partial meltdown. top cancer doctor, nuclear radiation, the most carcinogenic thing that exists. By the atom. And you put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. But a single atom can give you cancer, or 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. It can give you heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases that can manifest. It compromises your immune system and makes you susceptible now, incredibly susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally benign and innocuous and harmless. Minister ordered to halt the cooling after he was advised seawater can cause a chain reaction. 670 kilometers of the coastline washed away, 2,000 square miles floating around in the ocean after. There's no way to restore power. There's no way to pump fresh water because there was no fresh water to be found. So they were pounding in salt water, and they were only doing that to trick you and deceive you that they had it under control. They weren't doing it because they knew it was going to be effective. Every nuclear academic on the planet would have been screaming, "Don't put salt water on it." This is why you've seen those studies of the sulfur showing up in California and America after the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs was an effect that they knew from the 50s and 60s from detonating nuclear weapons under the ocean at the Bikini Atolls. Which, like, wrap your mind around that one. Just one of the bombs at the Bikini Atoll, the Bravo test, was equal to 1,000 Hiroshima-size bombs. The radioactive fallout was the same thing. It was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki, Hiroshima-type bombs. That's a nuclear war. That's an actual nuclear war. If China and Russia fire 500 Nagasaki, Hiroshima-sized bombs each at each other, is that a nuclear war? Do you think the radioactive fallout is not the same? That's global warming on top of that. Because the radioactive fallout pulses energy forever. Oil, gas, and coal doesn't pulse energy forever. Nagasaki does. Hiroshima did. The taser bomb was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki or Hiroshima 15 kiloton sized nuclear weapons going off. It's like America and India firing 1,900 nuclear Nagasaki bombs at each other. Is that not a nuclear war? If they did that, would that be a nuclear war? If Russia or America and India fired 1,900 Nagasaki bombs at each other, is that not a nuclear war? Would you say, well, that's a nuclear war, Dana? Or would you say, that's no big deal? No, you say that's a nuclear war, wouldn't you? Because you freak out if North Korea sets off a bomb the size of Nagasaki. You don't freak out when Americans are doing it all the time, or Russia's doing it all the time. It's because you're a well-disciplined lackey. Prime Minister ordered to halt to the cooling because he was advised seawater could cause a chain reaction or recriticality, which is a nuclear meltdown. Which is what they've done non-stop for 40 days. Now that goes down there, it's atomized aerosol, ionized and radiated, and then released into the environment as plumes. They murdered the planet. They've done everything they could to murder the planet when it melted down. And they continue to do it for 10 years. And this planet is incredibly resilient. We are obligated under the Bill of Rights, the Magna Cartas, the Constitutions, to do what we're doing right now, to stand up to this evilness, to fight back against this strawmen, these pirates, these goblins, these cowards. These are cowards. If you go up and you confront a nuclear academic, they will defecate right in your pants, stick their hands down there, pull it out, wipe it all over themselves to gross you out so you will leave them alone. They'll actually do it. I guarantee it, You can write it down and take it to the bank. 40% of Fukushima visitors show internal exposure to radiation. Internal. But not Nagasaki, not Hiroshima. For 75 years, they never got any internal radiation. No. You tell me that's not the definition of evil, to deny the survivors for 75 years. And only a handful left, you're like, frig it. Give them some free medical. Let's move on. 75 years before they gave them medical attention. 75 years of denying that they breathed in radiation at a nuclear bomb detonation. 75 years. This despicable, coward, incredible coward nuclear industry refused to acknowledge the victims. 75 years. If we do nothing, even Tokyo could become off limit. Japan, a senior politician. The government doesn't tell the truth. Even Tokyo could become off limit. Well, it is off limit. It just doesn't understand that it is. And they had the Olympics there to hoodwink the entire planet. The definition of stupid is not acting on what I'm showing you. That's the definition of lunatic, is not to act on what I'm showing you. That's the definition of a coward, not to act on what I'm showing everybody. You think this is fun to do what I'm doing? Do you think I don't wake up every morning in a panic and go into second gear? From the second that my eyes open, I am in second gear till I go to sleep at night. And I sleep like a rock. And if I don't sleep like a rock, it's because I'm terrified because of the stories I read that day or that night. We may not be able to live in Japan someday because radiation is going to be flowing out. Every facet of nuclear is cuckoo. If you look at nuclear, every facet of it, there's 9,000 industries. Every facet of it is cuckoo, is wacko. Japan media blackouted the word MOX, mixed oxide fuel, plutonium, and meltdowns. Average person in Seattle was breathing in 10 hot radioactive particles a day during April. And they'd done aerial measurements, and they decided to keep it secret because of national security. That was the official release. They weren't going to release the numbers that you paid for the equipment. You paid for their education. You paid for them to go do it, and they wouldn't release the numbers. Because you would call for the end of nuclear immediately, yeah? But you would also want it out of your hospitals right away, too. I'll show you some of that coming up shortly. Government simulation shows radioactive plume of Krypton-85 over Tokyo after reactor 3 with the MOX exploded on the 14th. That covered the northern hemisphere and wiped out around 90% of the insects in the first year and almost all the marine in the tidal zones, because we'd done 6 years of expeditions and the tidal zones were exterminated. They didn't come back. Japan's government alarmed by high levels of radioactive cesium detected outside of Tokyo in tea leaves. Highly radioactive substance detected in Tokyo. Higher, because that was the mixed oxide fuel that was found near Fukushima plant. This is lunatic stuff. Japan confirms full meltdown at all 3 reactors, and then they denied it for the next 3 years. Curium-244, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods, is the curium isotopes, requires lead shield 20 times thicker than you do for lethal plutonium, named after the devil, 238. And the curium isotopes are the biggest byproduct of those irradiated fuel rods in the pools, which is infinitely more than was in the reactors. And there was an absurd amount in the reactors, 800 tons per reactor versus 200 tons in a single reactor in Chernobyl. And Chernobyl is the worst nuclear accident in human history. So everybody who says that should be arrested and sentenced at least in jail for 10 to 20 years. Anybody who's ever said that put their name on a story that says Chernobyl is the world's worst nuclear accident should get at least 20 years in jail, retroactively. Everybody on the planet, every journalist that took the story from the IAEA or the nuclear industry or the World Nuclear News, and because that's who writes these articles, and then they publish it in their papers and put their name on it. Every one of those journalists should be in jail. The people who pretended they were on Reactor 4 should get life in jail on death row. Every one of them. And should all be publicly executed before they die a natural death in jail. None of them should be allowed to live forever. This is just common sense. The government, if we ever get a real government, that's what the government should be doing, right? Is obviously sentencing them to life minimum in jail. Every one of them. That's the moral and ethical thing to do. These are murderers. These make John Wayne Gacy's and Ted Bundy's look like little children fighting on a playground. Nuclear fission may also be happening in Reactor 1 and 3. Curium was mentioned. Curium is the nuclear meltdown itself. It's like we are in so much danger. We're losing all the species because of this, and everybody's pretending it's not happening. They're all pretending they're too busy to pay attention. They're too busy trying to survive. They're too busy to get educated so they can avoid being poisoned. They're too busy to spend a couple of hours getting educated enough, this is all it takes, so they can avoid eating anything from Japan or their loved ones or their children or their nephews or their grandchildren. Too busy to get educated enough to protect them for a lousy couple of hours of educational material. Because the nuclear industry is counting on that, and they're successful. Their nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. They know exactly what they're doing. They hate you. They hate me in particular. I'm despised. Every nuclear academic in the last number of years that got a degree had to swear allegiance that they would do everything they can to destroy me at some point in their life. You can't get a degree in nuclear without saying Dana Durnford is scum. That's part of the school test to get your nuclear degree. Is Dana Durnford a nuclear a scumbag, yes or no? And every nuclear scientist or academic got to check the yes box. Every one of them. That's a true story. Americium-241 plutonium detected in all soil samples off Fukushima coast. So plutonium detected, by the way, plutonium was detected in every cesium sample in Japan. Curium and plutonium outside the Fukushima plant indicated an explosion at Reactor 3. Well, the pictures tell that story, don't they? I showed you earlier. Broken spent nuclear fuel rods may have been scattered. May have been scattered. Somebody should take a picture and whoever wrote the story, knock them down and tattoo a picture of Reactor 3 on them. I think that'd be pretty cool. Right on their forehead. Every nuclear academic should have a picture of Reactor 4 and Reactor 3 tattooed on their forehead and their cheeks. That's actually a great idea. And put them in jail for life. Nuclear experts says americium has been found in New England. Elements are heavier than uranium. Now, you remember originally they were saying, well, uranium can't make it all the way over here because it's a heavy element, Dana. If you didn't take down my site, I would go and show you those comments. They were still on my site from way back in the day. Those people should be put in jail for life. There was 2,000 students from Taiwan, nuclear students, because they have a big university of nuclear down there. 2,000 of them. The story came out a few years back, we covered it, that the students at the nuclear universities, when Fukushima melted down, for part of their curriculum at the nuclear university was to spend 2 hours a day on the internet, seeding the internet that it was harmless, that it was like a banana, or it was like a potato chip, or it was like walking in sunshine, are like climbing a mountain or flying on an airplane, and every tweet and every Facebook and every YouTube post on the planet. They've done it for years and years. Every nuclear student, 2,000 of them. There was an article come out and we covered it. I thought that was probably one of the most disgusting, despicable, savage, vicious, hideous, gross, and bizarre facets of this story. It shows you that they're a cult, a death cult, see? Radioactive iodine found in Tokyo tap water. You can't get radioactive iodine without plutonium and curium fission products too. This is why they're excreting 240,000 becquerels a kilogram into their sewage, is because they're consuming it, drinking it, washing in it, breathing it. Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo, fearing radiation. They were the smart ones, weren't they? Japanese newspaper, leak plaguing Fukushima Reactor 5. Experts indicate deterioration in the system. Water containing 3,000 becquerels a liter of cobalt-60 had been used to cool the spent fuel. See, the spent fuel is hot. It's still splitting the atom, and it's boiling off the water. Instead of boiling off 3,000 becquerels a liter of just, they're emitting only the cobalt-60. There's no way it can't be loaded with all the other fission products. What a lunatic industry. Yellow rain recently reported in Tokyo happened after Chernobyl. The government assured the resident it was pollen, but it was actually snowing during the tsunami. Go check the videos. You'll see people on rooftops covered in snow. It was actually snow. No, Dana, the radioactive pollen, Dana. Well, it was radioactive pollen later, but not during the actual meltdown. Very strange. Fukushima were concerned about withdrawal from the plant. Japanese nuke companies shifting staff away. Very strange. There was no nuke companies there in the first place. Engineers fear yesterday 5.9 quake may have caused a fresh leak at Fukushima. Radiation levels around the plant have soared. Secret worst scenario was reactor exploding on number 1 and spent fuel pool 4 drying up. And of course, spent fuel pool 4 drying up. Oh, you mean like this? Not existing? Arnie Gunnarsson showed you that picture, but he didn't show you this one. How come? Arnie Gunnarsson made the assemblies for the fuel pools. Nuclear material flown to the ocean, a grave matter. Situation at Fukushima is deplorable. TEPCO admits that the radioactive water is flowing into the Pacific. Fears of ocean contamination. Fears marine life is being poisoned by nuclear material flowing from Fukushima. Experts warn of festering radioactive soil contaminating the food chain. The food chain. So I've done the research in the Pacific for 6 years. It was extinct. They killed it. It's killed. In the tidal zones, the very nursery, it was exterminated. I went back year after year all the way to Alaska, sometimes 2 or 3 times in 1 year, 4 to 5 months a year without coming home, doing a species count, and the species disappeared completely, 7,500 highly visible species, and they didn't come back. The ocean didn't recede the coastline. All the birds that showed up were emaciated. Millions of Cassini-auculates, millions of common murs. Common murs will dive 600 feet all day long, and they feed on anchovies and squid and sardines and krill, etc., etc. And they starve to death. The only way a bird can starve to death, because a bird can cover very long distances in a very short while, is if the food chain is permanently destroyed. And so that was emblematic of it. All the whales are emaciated. NHK shows curium detection 100 kilometers from Fukushima, where levels were high as Fukushima City. So Fukushima City, by the way, is 240,000 becquerels a kilogram of just cesium. The mayor wouldn't evacuate Fukushima City because he would lose his job. Concern over plutonium and uranium being deposited reconcentrated far away. Isotopes transferred to land via sea spray, aerosol, flooding, human exposure by inhalation, food, contact. Highly significant qualities of fission products are, in other words, what that's telling you, and I showed you the models, I showed you the actual numbers, is it's actually liberated from the ocean constantly and ends up in your communities on top of that. So it's not just a single doses that came through that were sustained for many weeks or months. It's forever. It's forever. This is coming at you constantly. They're burning it in the incinerators. It's constantly hemorrhaging into the ocean. The reactors originally need 4,800 tons a minute, 1,440 minutes a day. And they're pouring 300 tons a day. They're sucking up 300 tons a day. A garden hose in 24 hours is close to 300 tons. So they're using a garden hose on 4 melter reactors. A single garden hose is what they're saying. Right, so none of the stories can stand up to scrutiny is what we discovered unequivocally, unassailably, that they're perpetual liars. They're murderers. The whole bloody industry is nothing but murderers. Nothing but cowards. So I have 31 people total visit my site today. 2 days ago I had 24,000 subscribers. Today I got 24, which is good. That's a start. And there are 24, hopefully all good people. We know a few of the nuclear industry is going to be subscribed because they're monsters, right? They got to do it. But the rest of you are incredible souls. Highly significant quality of fission products are flushed into the environment by water on the molten cores, including plutonium and curium. Radioactivity recirculate for generations in ocean food chain. Meat content will increase with time. It's gone into overdrive now at this stage. And it's not too late to do the moral and ethical thing, which means the nuclear industry has to be held accountable, though. And they have, in increments over the last couple of decades, taken over key positions of the governments. They've captured the regulators. They completely ceded your media. All your media now has to bow with their eyes down. They're never allowed to look the nuclear industry actually in the eye. They're never allowed to lift their eye up and look them in the eye. They always got to keep their head down when they're talking to them. New study on a mysterious black substance releases fuel core material for Fukushima plant. Plutonium, uranium-236, curium discharged into the environment, likely in the form of fine particle. Once again, the biggest byproduct is curium. Death ash, that's curium. Obviously dispersed everywhere after it releases. Obviously. Hot particles attaches to clothes. The media is brainwashing the public. The media, there is no media. There's this bizarre, scum, degenerate cult. Nuclear engineer, a huge spray of radioactive material from the plant contained plutonium. Plutonium and uranium flow into the ocean from Fukushima. They got you thinking now all you got to worry about is tanks in a couple of years' time. That's the definition of stupid, see? That's the definition of evil beyond concept. Hollywood can't make any of this up. Heavily contaminated water is leaking out of the plant. Leaking! Everybody that says the word leaking should be forced to go to reactor 3 and kiss the building. Melted fuel, which is Medusa, because you're going to die. Melted fuel releasing hundreds of different radioactive materials. Officials refuse to investigate 90% of them. Nagasaki detects radioactive substances in sewage sludge 600 kilometers away. Big numbers. It's hard to imagine something more frightening than the industry wouldn't let the children escape. They gave them dosimeters so they can study them like they done with the Nagasaki Hiroshima victims. That they can't read or nothing. 80,000 children, 5-year-olds wearing dosimeters, right? They refuse to evacuate them. All the nuclear scientists will We should give them dosimeters so we can study the little bastards. Actual demonic. That's like, there's no criminal in a jail that meets the evilness of the nuclear academic world. None. They're the most bizarre, despicable, disgusting. Why are we letting them vomit all over us like they're doing? Government tells companies to conceal info on radioactive tea leaves because of public anxiety. So rather than pull it from the shelves, they say just conceal it. Nuclear industry, of course. 100 million becquerels per cubic centimeter of radioactivity estimated from Fukushima sludge. 100 million becquerels. Not millisieverts, not microsieverts, not unisieverts, not sieverts, but 100 million becquerels. Atomic decays per second, atoms, per cubic centimeter. Oh my God. Scale that up to a kilogram and multiply by 64 to get a square meter. And then you wonder why there's no more homeless in Japan. Radiological experts find up to 45 microsieverts, and they should be used in becquerels, see, per hour near school zones, 90 times higher than Chernobyl. The word hate doesn't do it justice how they see you. They had a Fukushima health study. 100 microsieverts a year is okay for pregnant moms. The effects of radiation do not come to people that are happy. They come to people that are weak-spirited. Radiation doesn't give a shit of your race, your religion, your ideology, or your age. It affects young people much worse than older people. But ultimately, if there's enough of it, it doesn't matter. It's going to destroy you anyway. So that person was in charge of the health studies for Fukushima. And we have videos of him, right? Like, he makes Hitler look like a schoolboy tantrum. Hitler was irrelevant when you compare him to this person here. What he was doing, he was responsible for, what he pulled off. Why are we sitting in silence and letting them do this to us? Do you got any idea? I'm just a single person, and they took down my site a couple of days with 24,000 subscribers and 1,600 videos, and now I got an amazing 9 people on my stream. 9 thumbs up! It's my first episode. It'll get better over time. Maybe. But it doesn't matter. I'm still going to have to sit here and do this every night. I can't sit in silent. Head of Fukushima health study. Murder them all. Let the devil sort it out. Greenland experienced a massive ice melt this week. Wait for it. So they're trying to say snow melts, exposes darker ice on the ground beneath, which absorbs sunlight and heats the planet up, instead of snow, which reflects it back out. But it's not. It doesn't actually work that way. The radiation that's released into the environment is pulsing energy every second. Oh, and get a load of this. Climate scientists who all promote nuclear as the solution. Marcos is climate scientist. Fedowitz is a climate scientist. The rapid melt followed the warm air being trapped over the Arctic island by a change in atmospheric circulation patterns caused by Fukushima. The other 2 records, also within the last decade, 2012 and 2019 for ice melts, all since Fukushima. All 3 now are since Fukushima. Gee, you don't suppose it got something to do with Fukushima? Doesn't let the ice crystallize anymore. 50 years after America's worst nuclear meltdown. I know what you think, it's 3 Mile Island. No, it's Santa Susana. They hid it away from you. Just like Fukushima. Accidents spit out up to 460 times the amount of radiation released during the 1979 meltdown at 3 Mile Island. And we got studies about that. 3 Mile Island, they said, released the same amount, or radiated 2 million people, but they got the same dose as if they watched a color television for an extra year. Now, to be fair, color televisions back in those days were brutal. Not you turn them on, you turn them off. Radiation, once it's in your body, is pulsing every second. It's destroying your body. Your body attacks white blood cells for the rest of your life. So totally different, right? You can't conflate the two of them. But don't get me wrong, color TV was brutal. But a single atom of radiation, ultimately you can end up with cancer down the road. Japan's earthquake rocks Tokyo Olympics as a magnitude 6. Magnitude 6. So we believe this is on the Japanese scale. And so let's just look at that. So the Japanese scale is 7. So you got to take the Richter scale, divide it 10 by 7. You get 1.428. Now you multiply that by Japan's scale of 6, and you get an 8.57. 8.6. Japan rocked. Earthquake rocks the Tokyo Olympics. Now they have multiple aftershocks. So that was most likely on the Japanese scale because they're so vague about it, right? So that was most likely because it was 130 miles away. An intense quake, intense. So a 6 earthquake is not an intense earthquake when it's over 100 miles away. At a magnitude 6, so this had to be on the Japanese scale. Pulsating several miles away in the capital city. Aftershocks. An Australian journalist, there's no such thing as a journalist anymore, an Australian lapdog for the nuclear industry described the feeling of the aftershock while live on air. The quake, which happened shortly before 6 a.m. local time, caused the roof to move and lights to adjust. Welcome back to Olympic City. The roof above us is moving. You might have noticed our lights and cameras are moving as well. But the earthquake, as I'll show you, and you got to show you children in leotards, because that's the pervert industry does. One journalist felt the ground move for more than 30 seconds from an earthquake 130 miles away. There's currently no tsunami threat. No, because it's got to be on the tectonic plates. The tectonic plates need to displace themselves significantly to actually cause a tsunami, right? A normal earthquake is not going to cause a tsunami. It has to be the tectonic plates displacing significant distances. There is currently no tsunami threat because they do that because they're scum. Others say they felt shaken for more than 30 seconds. The quake was off the coast of Ibaraki prefecture. They call it a 5.9. It was 10 kilometers deep. So the shallow earthquake like this has a more violent movement. And then they show you this bizarre thing that don't show you where the earthquake is to. There are numerous aftershocks and tremors reported. Numerous. Now that suggests an 8.5. Right? That's why I done the math and converted it into a Japanese scale, is because the numerous aftershocks, you're not going to get that from a 6. You will, though, get numerous aftershocks from an 8.5. And Japan is unbelievably, unimaginably notorious for doing that. Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. Why we're going strong. And this is the first episode, so we're almost through it, by the way. But we're covering a lot of issues because all of my videos have been taken down and my channel was closed because I have a flaw. It's called being honest. And that's a real flaw. That's actually a crime, to be honest, apparently. Try this again. Well, because I have 5 hard drives, not counting the one that's in the operating system, which is 2 terabytes. Which is 2 terabytes. Just 1 second. Let me do this a different way. There we go. You'll appreciate this. It's worth waiting for. Japan. Japan is a perpetual liar, is one thing for sure we discovered about Japan. That's all it knows how to do, is perpetually lie. I'll show you what I mean here. Here we go. So, and in northern Japan, I gotta put the rest of this here to tell the story. Here we go. Crazy Japan, eh? Where are we to? Here we go. Earthquake buries homes under landslides. Hokkaido, which is the most northerly prefecture in Japan. 2018. 2,000 people were in rescue. 22,000 people were in rescue efforts. It was a magnitude 6.6 quake. 6.6. If you go over to Wikipedia, it's actually 6.6 on Japan's scale of 7. So 6.6, there was 130 aftershocks, and a 6.6 in Japan's maximum intensity scale of 7 is a 9.5. So they told you it was a 6.6, but it's actually a 9.5. Now we know it's a 9. Now, the nuclear power plant is right there. See that marker? That's the nuclear power plant where the earthquake was to. And that's the earthquake. The red is where the epicenter was, right by the nuclear power plant. So nuclear power plant is right there. The epicenter was about 25 miles away. So look at this picture. Have you ever seen anything like this before? Where all the mountains are dropped. All the mountains dropped, both sides of them, because it wasn't a 6.7, right? It was a 9.5. So 6.7 doesn't do stuff like this. A 6.7 doesn't drop all the mountains. And when you zoom in on this, like, have you ever seen something like that before? That was a 9.5, see? They hid that away and called it. Now, that's happened, that I found in the last few years at least 3 times, where they had a 9 or a 9.5 with absurd damage, and they called it a 6 or a 6.6. And so you get 30 medias, and none of them will say what scale it's at. Well, that's the lie, actually. Some will call it the Richter scale, particularly like Fox and that, or CNN, or scumbag Australia media and British media. But what you ultimately find out, this is the Japanese scale. So 6.6 doesn't drop all the mountains. I've never seen nothing like that in my life. I've never even heard tell of nothing like this in my life. But this is how evil Japan is. It actually hides that kind of stuff. So the quake that they had now, causing all kinds of aftershocks, it was, again, you see, why don't they tell us how far away it was? Why don't they just go, oh, depth is at 10 kilometers? And mostly now what they do is they give you latitude and longitude. They don't tell you how deep it is or anything like that. They give you latitude and longitude. And they show you Ibaraki, but they don't show you where the earthquake is to. The earthquake was actually behind me somewhere. I'll get out of the way. You can see it's not marked. 5.8 magnitude earthquake straight off the coast. 6.0 75 miles off the coast. So you got to go through a lot of media to try to put the story together. Okay, so 75 miles, 80 miles east of Tokyo, and it's 10 miles deep. Now we finally got a bit of a picture, and that's actually unusual in the last couple of years to get that much information. It's actually extraordinary. But what it was an 8.5. So now they show you a model of 130 miles from Tokyo. But you can see there on the other, where the model, the line points, excuse me, right? They're making it seem further away because they got the beginning of the line way past Tokyo. The whole friggin' industry is lunatic. And then the tip of the arrow is right here, and they got it all out here. So that one says it's 130 miles away, but that's because they're not actually at Tokyo, right? They moved the goalpost. Welcome to the kooky, wacky, lunatic, and they say the depth is only 6 miles. Everybody else is 8 miles. So Fukushima, newborn heart problems surged after Fukushima. It was 14% per 100,000. 14,000 children per 100,000 live births need open heart surgery because of congenital heart problems. That's just one of the many things that manifested. So they closed 9,000 farms in Ireland, Scotland, UK after Chernobyl. Chernobyl was 200 tons. Fukushima, each reactor was 800 tons. Okay, we're getting close. So radiation-induced lung injuries. So you go to the hospital and you got cancer. You say to your doctor, well, there's nothing we can do to you, you got cancer. Well, doctor, there's got to be something to do. Well, if you sign this piece of paper, we can get you chemotherapy. The government's going to pay for it. Will it help, doctor? Well, I don't know, but that's the only option you got. But you got to sign this piece of paper saying you can't sue the doctors for giving you chemotherapy. And no two chemotherapies are the same. They're like terracotta soldiers. Everyone is different. Okay, so when they start treating you, what they call treating you, it's not, they're murdering you. When they start to murder you with radiation, there's many things happens. So you got a tumor right here, say for instance, or right there, right here, wherever, right here, who knows, right, somewhere. And now they're going to pound you with radiation, your whole body. They're going to pound you with radiation. So you're going to get radiation-induced lung injuries, radiation-induced brain injuries. You're going to get brainstem injuries in children. You got kidney injuries from radiation. You got body radiotherapy, which means lung injuries and everything else, your whole body. Your body goes through hypoxia because it kills the ability to produce oxygen throughout your whole body. So they got you hooked up to a tank. Reconstruction of radiation-induced injuries of the lower urinal tracts. Radiation-induced injuries. Because, you got a tumor somewhere in your body. So you got to kill your body, and now you got to try to survive it. And hope cancer got killed. Literally the most bizarre, unbelievable, bizarre thing I've ever seen. Radiation therapy for the treatment of prostate cancer has been evolving since its introduction in the early 20th centuries, around 1896. Since 1896, they murdered you if you had prostate cancer with radiation. They've never cured you a single time with it. The 3%, I'll show you a study about it, 3% of the people that live longer with it than without it, allegedly, was the same percentage as misdiagnosis. So they never even had cancer. Since the 1930s, saw the first use of external beam radiation therapy. Man, back then you were a goner. Not only that, they were giving you radon water to drink on top of that, so your jaw would eventually drop right off. Early radiation-induced bone marrow injuries. Radiation-induced Preparation for terrorist threat, radiation injuries. That's what a hospital does. That's terrorism, right? Giving you radiation. They're desensitized at this stage, see? But that's terrorism, to give you radiation in your hospitals. And we're doing it everywhere. There's countries that are begging for radiation. Please, we're a poor country. Can you give us some radiation equipment? People get cancer here. They're eating Japanese food. We gotta cure them. Radiation injuries to intestines following radiotherapy. Radiation injuries, another silent epidemic. Congenital heart disease. 14,200 children per 100,000 live births. I know I had this somewhere. In Japan. Because they're breathing the air, their parents are eating and drinking radiation, and the children, if they survive, got to get open heart surgery when they're born. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Lung injuries from radiation. Spinal cord barrier disruption. Central nervous system radiation injuries. Radiation-induced lung, radiation-induced bowel injuries. Radiation-induced kidneys. Radiation nervous system injuries. Radiation-induced cranial nerve injuries. Radiation-induced injuries. So meet Cassandra. She died last year in 2020. And because she was a juvenile, and the nuclear industry is a lunatic, if a juvenile has cancer, they have to get radiation treatment. You gotta get it if you're a kid. It's the law. In some places, like Canada, it's the law. They're going to take your child, they're going to put him in the hospital, and in her case, she lost the fight for radiation. She didn't want it, and she had to get the chemotherapy. So the child services took her to court. A juvenile court judge removed Cassandra from her family, who was 17, and placed her under armed guards at the Children's Medical Center, and then murdered her with radiation. Her mom said after she died, and she had to have a fundraiser to get a casket and have a funeral because she was bankrupted from the radiation. I raised her to be a fighter, and that's what she was. She went through hell, and she never had a life. She never had a chance. And I hold every doctor and nurse who touched her. Well, you should hold the nuclear industry accountable. They're murdering all your children in all the hospitals, all your loved ones, all your friends, and all your families. Because you won't hold them accountable. You won't speak out. This is why they silence people like me. By the way, it was discovered that human kidneys are at least 50 times less efficient than animal kidneys at removing plutonium. If you go look up this study, it was originally in 1985, it was repeated in 2004. And it showed 2.3% in Australia and 2.1% of chemotherapy in the United States, where people survived longer with it than they would have without it. If you don't get it, they have a much better quality of life. You can cure cancer, by the way, with DCA. So the question was, why are we still using radiation when only 3% efficiency of treatment? And 3% is the same number as misdiagnosis. They didn't have cancer in the first place. Because the nuclear industry is a lunatic. Radiation-induced injuries to the visual pathways. You go get a tumor and you get radiation treatment, it wrecks your entire body. We're almost through this. We're just a few minutes away from the end of the show. Bear with me, because this is worth it. Radiation injuries to the heart. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Radiation-induced cardiac injuries for breast cancer. Radiation-induced rectal injuries. Radiation language decline after brain radiation therapy. This is not therapy. You got to sign a piece of paper saying you can't hold him responsible for the side effects. And they know, because I show you all these studies. You think they don't know all these studies exist? Radiation brain tumors, brain narcosis. So I'm going to play a clip of a police officer who had twin daughters. It's just a short clip. It's the Brzezinski cure, had a cure, and the police officer was barred from using the cure on his daughter.
My name is Sergeant Rick Schiff. I'm an 11-year veteran of the San Francisco Police Department. I hold the department's highest Medal of Honor for bravery. That used to mean a lot more to me than it does now. What I'd like to talk to you about today is my now 7-year-old daughter. This is an identical twin. Her sister is now dead. Her sister, when she was 4 years old, Kristen, developed a highly malignant brain tumor that had spread throughout her spine and her brain. The doctors told us that we had really two options: take her home, let her die, or bring her in for massive dosages of chemo and radiation simultaneously. In either event, she was going to die. They were quite certain of that, and very quickly. Believing her only chance to be the standard route, we gave her the chemo and radiation. It burned her skull so bad she had second-degree burns and her hair never came back. To change her diapers, we had to wear rubber gloves because her urine was so toxic and it burned her. At the end of 6 months, miraculously, she survived the standard treatment, although there was a high expectation she wouldn't. She still had cancer. We were told, sorry, we've done everything we can. Now she's going to die, probably within a couple of months. My wife and I, choosing not to accept that, started reading. The first book I picked up, the third chapter, discussed Dr. Brzezinski. As you may guess, I have some expertise in fraud. In fact, I'm quite certain there are enough attorneys in the room that I could be vaudeered as an expert in fraud. And I conducted my own investigation. I have no doubt the man is not a fraud. I have no doubt that he does what he does out of earnest belief that his medicine works. And now you're in a position to judge for yourselves whether it works or not. But it's well established by the FDA that it's non-toxic. 18 months later, we took my daughter off the anti-neoplastin. She had not died. She had no signs of tumor. She remained free for 18 months of cancer. Within a month, the cancer was widespread in her brain. We put her back on Brzezinski's. By the way, at the objections of our doctors, for some reason felt that it had failed her. We put her back on. Within 9 weeks, the tumor was completely gone. She died last July of neurological necrosis. Her brain fell apart from the radiation. The autopsy showed that she was completely cancer-free. Out of 52 cases of that disease ever, no one died cancer-free, just Chrissy. So she didn't die of a terminal illness. She died of my inability to care for her properly, and she died from bad advice. She died because there's a government institution that disseminates false information and is not looking out for the welfare of the people. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I swore an oath 11 years ago, and I think most of us in this room swore it at one time or another, to uphold the Constitution. It says life right in the beginning.
Wrap your mind around it. You really think that the hospitals can cure you? I guarantee you he doesn't. You really think eating that food is a solution? You think continuing to grow it is a solution to their nuclear batshit lunatic industry? It's not. Okay, so we got 24 subscribers. One of them just subscribed as a well-known troll, who's I got blocked, but you can't get rid of him. So 24 subscribers, that's pretty good for my first day, is it? I got 33 playbacks of my videos. The nuclear industry must be loving it. So how do I keep this operation up and running now? I wanted to head over to the Quebec and Labrador border with the boat next week How am I going to do a fundraiser when a 2-hour show, I got 33 people? That's a 2.5-hour show, which will probably be blocked, my luck, because I played that little clip there. Now, we got lucky. We had an anonymous 3 donor donated 1,200 Canadian. And today I spent $330 on the exhaust. Of the vehicle, because we snapped that off. I don't know if anybody's aware of that. I should be able to play a clip of that. Let me bring in a clip of that. Now, I made arrangements yesterday afternoon to get it in the garage. We never got the donation today. It was getting done anyway, right? But I didn't know they were going to ding me that much for it. And just bear with me. I'll bring up some clips from yesterday evening. Maybe. Yeah, there we go. This is chaos, by the way. Wait, I gotta adjust the audio on 2 of them. Let's see if I can tell the story of the last few hours. It's Tuesday. I got home this morning, 3:30. More trouble in paradise. Water pump's gone, but it'll lighten up. Sure if you can see it. Hang on. Give it a second. Let me see. I'll change the aperture. Excuse me. Look at where she broke off right by the donut on the exhaust. Here, wait now. Another video. You can see it snapped right off. Look at that. So I took all the mud guards off everything here, because there's a whole chummy goes right here, covers all of this. And I grinded everything down, because that's connected to the catalytic converter, see? And that's right by the manifold. And so I'm going to try to get that welded, but I got all the pre-work already done, because the first garage turned me down. I can't afford to do the water pump. We can't afford to do that. Now we can. And the radiator, fucking radiator's gone too. And so I picked up a radiator for $100. I ordered it in from Amazon. The water pump, it's here already. The water pump's fucking, see that? Probably can't see it. The water pump's shot. She's blowing water all over it. I busted up. I got 3 problems at one time. Not only that, YouTube gave me a strike on my account for SafeCast, because I called out SafeCast. They called it cyberbullying for making a single comment in a 1.5-hour video about these people. And I appealed it. I don't know if I win or not. It's getting crazy. How am I supposed to keep this operation moving forward with just... We can't raise enough money just to do the expedition, let alone fix everything, right? So I got home this morning, everything's just... I got everything piled everywhere, because I'm busted up and I can't keep up with anything. Welcome to Dana's world. Okay, and so that's the water pump I picked up this afternoon. That was the bill, but it didn't show up. I took more pictures. So I picked up 2 jugs of pure antifreeze because we got to change the radiator. I already got that. I ordered that in. Once the water pump, I discovered the radiator was broke. So that's today. And you can see all the parts for the... I got a video out coming up, not very good, but that's for the manifold. $330, and you can see where to put a new manifold in, right there. Oh, that's the video. It's a real bad video because it was pretty dark. Okay, wait, there's even next video. Or maybe that's before that. Try that one. It's a bad video, but you can see the new exhaust. Hopefully. See the new exhaust. You can kind of see it. Look at the friggin' mess they made with the exhaust. So I'm just gonna put that back on. I don't know why the camera's lagging when I'm shooting that. $330. $330. And so I got someone that's gonna do. Looks like they put some kind of. I got somebody who's gonna do the install, because when I got a quote from the garage, they were gonna burn me. They wanted $660 plus taxes to do the radiator and the water pump. And so I got another guy who's going to do it for a couple of hundred, 225 maybe. And he's supposed to do it tomorrow or Saturday. So that'll be solved because we can't tow the trailers, see? And so that's, we got lucky in the context of it could have been way worse. And then we got super lucky, incredible lucky, because we got a donation from Anonymous 3 for 1,200 Canadian. And so I wasn't in very good shape, right? And all of a sudden today I got that. Around lunchtime I noticed that. So which meant that I can go ahead and finish the work, right? We got 24 subscribers and 1 troll subscribed. And nobody else donated because people can't find me. I guess everybody figures now I gave up and went away because they took down my site, right? But I didn't. And everybody should know that about me, is that the last thing that is going to happen is I'm going to give up and go away. That's the very last thing that's going to happen. But what is going to happen is I'm struggling, and I'm really going to struggle. And so I'm praying that everybody can find me, but I got 9 thumbs up, 35 views, and how many thumbs down have I got? I wonder already. I had 5 2 hours before the show started that the filter picked up on. I still only got 2 thumbs down. I'm sure the lunatics have found me, and my video from last night was 9 thumbs down, for God's sakes, for talking about Fukushima. They're trying to get rid of me again, right? And so obviously there's something going on that we're missing, right? They didn't take my site down because they were bored. They took my site down because something happened, right? And it wasn't just a random thing. This order had to come way up the food chain. So here we are. We got the first show in. And because the first show is important for your first episode on a channel, God, well, you know, that's the way it works around here. I should be doing a 4-hour show every day, right? Because 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour show still doesn't cover very much, because there's so many details that you got to cover. There's so many facets that you can't leave out, right? If you're gonna educate the population, then you gotta bring the documentation. I can't do a radio show because it won't educate the population. And in order to do the types of shows that I'm doing, they're unbelievably labor intensive to get all my ducks in order. Then I got to sit there for several hours to tell the story, and I still got, like, I'm burnt out. I'm literally burnt out, and there's no end in sight. I got to try to rebuild this site, this whole operation. We got to keep it going forward. We raised a significant donation today. That changes the game. That gives us hope. And I got to hope to raise enough to sustain me till the site builds. Right, that's what I got to shoot for in the next week. And summer's coming to a close. We got to get more research in. We want to get out on the ocean. So hopefully by Monday or Tuesday, several hundred people minimum are subscribed to the site. And because this was an attempt, right, to shut down this research. Because we were, and I'll show you that in tomorrow's episode, the spiders are gone, the ants are gone, the birds are gone, the insects are all gone. And I was reporting on that, but they took my site down and got rid of the documentation, right? So I got to try to tell that story again now to get those who are just finding me up to speed. But we got to get the documentation out there to show everybody else. And because it's the end of the season, we got to try to get the hell back out there. And what we would like to do is get back out on the ocean. But I can't tow the boat with the truck with an exhaust pipe snapped off because you got no power and it sounds like a helicopter. And then we got that solved today. Sounds great. And tomorrow I got to try to get the water pump, the radiator fixed. That'll resolve that. And I can tow the trailer or the boat. I guess we're going to have to launch the boat. We want to tow it 400 miles away, launch it, shoot across to the Quebec border, Labrador border. There's 1,000 islands there and 250 miles of fjords and inlets where it's nice and safe. And get over there and finish out the season doing research. And I'm busted up. Now my stomach is healed really good. The infection is gone. And so I'm feeling a lot more energy, right? My knees are healed up because we busted them open when I fell down. And they're almost healed up. There's no infection. Because I was using saline solution to clean everything regularly. And I was using $2.50 bandages. That sucks the infection out, right? You can leave it on for 4 days at a time. And they're designed for... No, number 25 is a troll, not number 24. I never said that to you, Organic Slant. I said I got 24 subscribers. I got 25, but only 24 are subscribers. The other one is a troll. There's no reason I would call Organic Slant a troll, man. I don't know why you would think that. Mark. I'm glad I caught the comment anyway. No, I don't want to mention the name of the person because they're crazy, right? And I didn't know you were number 24. I'm just saying I got 25 subscribers. The 25th subscriber is a troll, and I didn't want to mention her name. It was a female. And who knows, right? Maybe I was slurring my words and you couldn't make out what I was saying. But we can't be causing a divide when I'm this fragile, right? This whole operation is unbelievably fragile right now. And there's no reason to call Organic Slant a troll, for God's sakes. He's been up to fighting the industry for years. No, the number 25, because I got 25 subscribers. And I don't know why that other one subscribed to me. She's a disgusting piece of shit, and everybody knows it, including her. But anyway, hopefully, okay, yeah, there you go, Mark heard me. It's okay, Mark, don't worry about it. Yeah, Steve, Diablo Canyon is brutal. I'm not sure if that's surrounded by farms or a community, because some of the nuclear power plants are surrounded by communities. And, no, Mark, I know who you are. There's no way I'm going to call you a troll, man. Good God. No worries, but I hear where you're coming from, right? I'm not reading the comments, right? I just happened to be at the end of the show. I looked down and seen yours. Yeah, Obsolete Optics got it right. He knows who I'm talking about. She's a lunatic, right? She's with Ernie Gunnison, as far as I know. She's a despicable piece of shit, that lady. Well, she's not a lady. She's a scumbag who probably was a drywaller, because she puts so much makeup on. The only way you can do that is if you were a drywaller. I'm not kidding you. Have you ever seen who I'm talking about? Just a horrific piece of scum. That's kind of fun to talk about that piece of shit like that anyway. But I'll let everybody go. So there's going to be another show tomorrow night. I might very well go 7 days a week when I'm home from here on out for the rest of my life. We are going to war against this industry. I'll be starting up so-called fan site where you can get access to other material. It costs us $5 a month, and if we can get enough people to jump on that, we can raise enough money to keep the operation maybe moving forward. I don't like using the word fan site, but just for lack of a better word right now. Japan is insane. The nuclear industry is literally murdering everybody and everything on the planet, and they should be held accountable too, right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's okay, Organic Slant Boy. I know you don't have much. Don't leave yourself short, man. But we want to get back out on the research. I got to get everything fixed. That might be accomplished tomorrow or Saturday for sure. And I think I'm gonna need a few days just to recover, or not, whatever, because we're running out of time. We got to get back out in the woods. I like to go over to the Quebec-Labrador border, because then you only got to pull the anchor each day. There's 250 miles of inlets. I can go ashore and do species counts over there, because there's no communities for hundreds of miles. And so there's no way they can blame pollution. It's a dangerous trip, but we got the operation. We can pull it off. And so I'm going to try to put the boat in the water maybe Monday and see if it's safe, because we never used it this year. I fired it up a month ago, but the kicker is not pumping water, so we might have to get that resolved. That's just going to be impeller, basically, for a little rubber impeller. We'll deal with it. We'll figure it out over the next little while. Okay, God bless everybody. My apologies for a long video, but this is episode 1. We might only get a couple of episodes in before I head back out on the expedition. And tonight, for the first episode, I want to cover all different types of facets of Fukushima nuclear, right? So we covered the hospital stuff, we covered a little bit of Chernobyl, a little bit of 3 Mile Island, Santa Susana, lots of Fukushima, lots of the radioactive fallout in the Northern Hemisphere, stuff like that. And then some recent news, we covered the Nagasaki, Hiroshima, the unbelievable, unimaginable, incredible betrayal. For 75 years, refused to acknowledge Nagasaki, Hiroshima victims had breathed in radiation. They only studied external. The despicable cowards. You disgusting cowards. You revolting cowards that done that. For 75 years, generations of inbreeds stabbing victims. That's the legacy of nuclear. And we're going to change that. Your reign of terror is coming to an end. It is going to happen. This world is going to wake up. This world is going to come looking for you, scum, degenerate, murderous, dirtbags, coward, nuclear industry, revolting inbreeds. Your time is up. The gig is up. And just because you knocked down my main site doesn't mean I'm going to slow down. Quite the opposite. It means we are going to battle. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody at some point. Yeah, I'll put links below to other sites soon. Kind of want to get up to that speed. I'm a little overwhelmed. I haven't stopped since I opened my eyes this morning. And it's almost midnight, just a few minutes away from midnight right now, 10 minutes to midnight. I'm exhausted, but I'm super happy we got a stream in. Thrilled that we actually got a live show in. The next one, I'll only be half the length, or maybe the same length, who knows. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Extra hugs for Anonymous 3. Outstanding. God bless. And we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care, folks.